Welcome to the Opinionated Benchwarmers podcast, episode 180. Your Opinionated Benchwarmers are back to do what we do best. That's what's core sports. Got my brother in here, Ramon. Obviously, life be lifing, so Carlos couldn't record with us today, but we'll hold it down for him. Ramon, man, what's up?
Nothing much, man. I'm feeling pretty good. As we were talking kind of offline, I know that you coming out of a little bit of a little break on that end. I'm actually in the midst of kind of a little break, being able to recharge. As the listeners know, of course, we have busy lives, a lot of stuff that we do outside of the podcast. So every now and then we just got to kind of pull back a little bit. So I'm in the midst of that right now, just kind of pulling back, but still wanted to get in here, get it done, get something out for our listeners. I know they'd be wanting to hear from us. So, long-winded answer to say I'm doing pretty well, bro. And just kind of excited about, of course, everything we're gonna talk about thus far. But as I say all the time, man, now we ask, you ask us, but we got to find out how you doing, man. How's everything rolling on your end?
Yeah, as you know, I pulled up in Charlotte to see my Saints play. So I wasn't too happy on Sunday afternoon, but I was very happy on third Monday morning when I found out that Dennis Allen was fired. So I mean it was a good, I enjoyed my Charlotte trip and I enjoyed everything, but the game was just like a dumpster fire. It was just a bad brand of football on both ends, not just us, but Charlotte as well. I mean, the Carolina Panthers as well. So I mean, it was all right. So I mean, we'll get to that and more. Obviously, that's on our list. But I want to, just shout out to all the first time listeners, first time viewers. If you're on YouTube, make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube. Hit the bell on the video and hit the like button as well. That's how you can get our name and help us out a little bit. We also on any platform that you like to listen to your podcast on. So make sure that you subscribe there as well if you're an audio person. But we'll jump into it. Like I think that's a good place to start here. Finally Dennis Allen is out of there. I don't know if you had some thoughts on that. I'll keep it brief. I mean, I think it's something that I've been echoing pretty much all season, probably, beginning of last season. It just was a lot of things that Dennis Allen didn't do. And then now you hear the reports that come out that there was a disconnect in the locker room. I didn't need reports to tell me that. I mean, you could see it on the field. It looked like the guys clearly gave up on Dennis Allen. But when you look at a guy in Dennis Allen who has never really been successful as the head guy, it doesn't really surprise me. And I think that it's ironic that, he was fired with the Raiders as, Derek Carr, his quarterback lead man, and then he fought, uh, you know, tooth and nail to get him over to New Orleans. And I think that that's ultimately was his downfall. After watching Carr again in person, I don't feel like Carr is the guy either. He's not going to lead us to the promised land. I think he's above average quarterback at best. But I mean, I think that it's a good move for us. I think that at this point in the season, I think after what I saw, I was just like, I know as a fan that has been with us through some rough years since Drew Brees has retired, even before Drew Brees, those last year or two, I still watch. And I think that after what I saw in Carolina, I said if Dennis Allen is our coach next Sunday, I'm not watching any more football until he's no longer our coach. I mean, I couldn't subscribe to that brand of football. So at this point, just to keep it quick, I am happy about it. I think that, ultimately we're headed in the right direction. I think we got to stop padding the Bobos per se and rip that band-aid over and start over. But I think that something stood out to me, Ramon, and I'm gonna turn it over to you. But the Saints, we haven't made a move like this since 1980. It's been 44 years where since we fired a coach mid-season. So that lets you know the severity of this. And I think, to tie into my point, Gail Benson knew that if she did not fire him, she would lose a lot of fans. And it's a business move. I think a lot of fans would have tapped out, just like I would have tapped out after what I saw Sunday. So good move. I'm interested to see who we got and who we can pull in. But I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic per se, because I don't really believe in the front office either. So.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, to that point, things can be bigger, honestly, than just Dennis Allen. But I think that it was obvious for anybody that was watching, that, of course, as you mentioned, he had lost the locker room, and he's really in over his head as a head coach. Not every guy is meant to be a head coach. Not every guy that kind of thrives as a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator or any of those aspects is really meant to be the head guy. And you saw that really in Dennis Allen for 3 seasons, it was nothing but mediocrity. You look at a 7-10 season, think a 9-8 season, and then the way that things were heading this season after that 2-0 start, 7 consecutive losses, and then like you said, nail in the coffin when you lose to the Carolina Panthers, then that just kind of puts the nail in the coffin, and that's really it at that point. And I think that it's been obvious and apparent that for a while he's lost that locker room. We've seen that time in and time again with coaches, whether it's a head coach, whether it's a coordinator. Once you lose the locker room, like that's it. There's nothing that you can do to right that ship at that point. We saw it even on the local level with Matt House as the defensive coordinator last year. Once he lost that locker room, that defense was in shambles. And so I think, as you mentioned, the Saints had to get ahead of it because, of course, you still gotta get people into that dome, for the rest of the season. And then also too, you got to get ahead of things as it relates to what head coaching candidates could be out there. You get your name in the hat as early as you can, and start having, backdoor conversations while you can so that you can really get the guy that's the next one to come. And then I think that what you're faced with as well too is you're faced with different expectations at this point, no matter what. After the Sean Payton and Drew Brees era, expectations have been reset for the New Orleans Saints. So it's no more of that, prior to that era, you maybe can get away with some mediocrity. You had many years where it's kind of a little bit of bottom dwelling and things of that sort. Expectations, once they get to a certain place and once they've been reset, you can't change that for a fan base. And so now that's the where New Orleans Saints are. You won a Super Bowl as an organization. You were a perennial playoff contender. You had, so many times where you were finishing on top of your specific division. And that's where the expectations are. And the expectations aren't going to change now at this point for Saints fans. You're not going to find it where Saints fans now are going to be okay with mediocrity year in and year out. The expectations now are to be able to be in the playoffs and to be able to contend. And if you can't do that, then you aren't the guy to be leading the Saints at this point.
Yeah, I agree. You said it well. You said it well. I can't add anything onto that. I will add on to the news. We'll get into more trades, but I think it's relevant just to add on to wrap up the Saints segment. But Marshon Lattimore, a deal that we had to make, was traded to the Commanders, and in return, the Saints received a third, fourth, and seventh round pick, I think, from Atlanta. So I think that was a good move.
From Washington,
Well, from Washington, what did I say?
Atlanta, mistakenly.
Atlanta.
I know you didn't want to say Atlanta.
Oh, okay. Oh, my bad. My bad. You knew it was coming. But I think that I joked offline. It was just a thing where I was like, okay, now now the front office want a front office now. So I think that, Gail Benson's call to fire Dennis Allen and maybe have made some shakings in the building, and now the GM has made a move. But, my thoughts on the move, I think it was a good move for the Saints. I wish Marshon the best up here in the DMV. Of course, I'll probably see him in person a couple times because Jaden's up here now. So I'm a Jaden fan, so I'll be at some Commanders games. But to go from 2-7 to 7-2, I don't think Sean has any issues with that. He is a great cornerback. I think one of the best in the league. I do think that injuries have been heckling him for the past 2 seasons, so people really hadn't gotten a chance to see that consistent play. But I think it was a good move for the Commanders, and as you can see, the Commanders are very serious and they're going for it all. They had a franchise quarterback in place. They're sitting at 7-2, leading their division. And nobody would have guessed it prior to the season. But for my Saints, I love how we are starting to make moves and we're starting to say, hey, look, let's rebuild, let's break this thing down. So I love the move. I think we should have done the same with Alvin Kamara. Huge Alvin Kamara fan. Hate to see these guys go. But realistically, when you're running a franchise, you have to set your team up for the future.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that you said there. It was a move to me that was mutually beneficial. I think that both teams in the deal got what they needed to get out of it. Obviously, for the Saints getting away from that salary with Marshon Lattimore, being very honest with yourselves of knowing, okay, where you are as a franchise right now and not being in that particular state of contention, but knowing you got to get assets at this point. You got to get assets and begin to build the right way. So I think that made sense. And then I think from the Washington Commanders standpoint, as you already said, they have their guy in Jaden Daniels at this point. They sit at 7-2. And one of the best windows, honestly, for you to contend is when you have identified your quarterback and he's on that rookie deal. That is one of the best windows to contend. You can put money in so
Yeah.
many other positions because he hasn't gotten that big payday just yet. And we've seen that been beneficial for, several franchises. And so I think that, they had the wherewithal to make that move. They had gotten one of those picks, I think previously in the Jahan Dotson trade. So they were able to kind of take one of those picks and maneuver and make this move. And this just continues to bolster them as a team. And I think that, as you stated, I don't think that if Jaden wasn't doing what Jaden has been doing, I don't think that they make this move. But I think that their confidence that they have in their leader, really, of their franchise at this point, caused them to make the move. So if I look at it, it's really a truly mutually beneficial deal, is what I would say.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the deal, just for the Saints to give a little bit more context, and then we'll move on. But they saved $600,000 in salary this year of Marshawn, and by getting him off the books, we will eat $31.6 million of his salary in dead money, with no options to split in future years. But we'll be done after that forever. It's off the books after the next year's season. Just for your information, just to add on to what you were saying about when you have a quarterback on a cheap deal, Lattimore still do $36.5 million over the next 2 seasons. So we will no longer have to take that hit. So, I mean, I think it was a good move. And I think that that's one of those things when you look at us, 30 plus million above the salary cap, these are the deals that you have to make. I mean, we can move on here. I think that we have interesting trade today with the Cowboys. We have Jerry Jones, who has publicly stated that they're going for broke, that he still has faith in his team despite where they are after another disappointing loss to the Atlanta Falcons this past weekend. They say that they need a receiver. And Ramon, I'm gonna let you take it away. They trade for Jonathan Mingo from the Carolina Panthers. And I was at the Panthers game this past Sunday, like I mentioned earlier. I didn't hear his name called once. So I'm not familiar with his statistics. He might have went off and caught a couple passes, but I was at the game. But my point is that I didn't feel like he made an impact. But yet, here we are. Jerry Jones gives a fourth round pick. We've seen receivers go for fifth round, conditional picks, sixth round. DeAndre Hopkins a part of one of those deals. Deontay Johnson a part of another one. But here we are.
Yeah, I think, ultimately getting into it, like you said, the details of the deal. So the Cowboys acquired Jonathan Mingo in a 2025 seventh round pick, and the Panthers end up acquiring the 2025 fourth round pick, as you stated. And so, kind of in looking at the deal, I do think that it's an interesting one for me from a couple different aspects. As you've already stated, Jonathan Mingo hasn't really proven himself, in the league at this point. This is, I think, his second year in the league, and that makes him basically a year removed from being a second round pick of a guy that they were looking to basically bring in to become probably the alpha over there in Carolina to be a weapon for Bryce Young. And he just hasn't lived up to that just yet to do so. I don't understand necessarily the Cowboys' thought process of being so aggressive right now when, of course, we've gotten the Dak news of Dak is going to be out for a substantial, probably period of time at this point. So we know that they're likely going to be in the Cooper Rush era once again over there. So to kind of be putting the chips in is not maybe the smartest move to me at this particular point. But I do believe that ultimately, it's one of those moves that they're trying to bank and bet on maybe something they saw leading into the draft the previous year and what they thought about Jonathan Mingo. Now, what I will say, the only piece that, although I don't think that the Cowboys won this deal, I would say that the Panthers won this deal. The only thing I can say for the Cowboys is that just as I know these positions are different, but just as we become so accustomed to some of the younger and rookie quarterbacks shining, and we talked about before that maybe it takes a little bit of time. I think we become very accustomed to as well the Justin Jeffersons of the world, the Jamar Chases of the world that come in year one and they're instantly an instant impact guy or one of the tops in the league. And so I think that from this, we have to see, maybe give Jonathan Mingo a little bit of time. Maybe he's a guy that takes a little bit more time to develop. And maybe it'll show up in a year or two or so. But when you look at it currently now, I think that Carolina probably got the better of this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's interesting here because from the Dallas aspect, and what direction are you trying to go? And that was a good question. I quite don't understand it. Like you said, Jonathan Mingo was a project. The verdict's still out on whether he'll be talented or not. I know I made the joke earlier about him not making an impact or whatever, but the reality of it is that all the analysts had him high on their list, including the Panthers, like you mentioned. But where is Dallas going with this? Because I feel like if you're bringing in a project that's not impact, and then you're giving up a fourth round pick, you're giving up a fourth round pick for a player that you don't really know. It's going to pan out, and the verdict is still out on it. I don't understand that. Jerry Jones and his access of his team, and I want to be very respectful when I say this, but maybe his time in this position has expired, and maybe he needs to allow someone else to take the reins because it seems like he's detached are out of touch into what is going on with the roster. You paid Dak, made him the highest quarterback in the league. You paid CD Lamb, and yet you have no return. You bring back Zeke. Zeke looked like he's been running in mud since week one. Now it's reported that he missed some meetings and he didn't even play this week because you suspended him. You don't have a running game. You didn't bring in Derrick Henry. You had opportunity to bring in a running back. And we all see the year that Derrick Henry, which is on pace for maybe 2,000 rushing yards, possibly barring any injury, and you do this, and we supposed to feel as though I don't know, you're in the right mind to occupy the spot of a GM of a team. I don't understand it.
Yeah, no, to your point, it's just business and all that in general. At a certain point, you have to begin to hand things over to, let's just call it kind of the next generation, or the ones that may be a little bit more cutting edge with, the current trends, the recent technology and things of that sort. And I think that it's a little bit difficult for Jerry Jones to be accepting of that, because he has, of course, been in that place and in that spot of power for so long, and he probably can't see it. And he doesn't strike me too as one of those people that's going to be willing to have, like, let's just say, a corner or a group of people that can really advise him, to tell him that, hey, maybe it's time to hang it up, or maybe you need to kind of take a step to the side. So I do think that that's something that's going to continue to hamper the Cowboys, because obviously too, in Jerry Jones, he's just going to think contention every year. He's not going to think of going through the proper process to then build again, or, and sometimes I think that people look at rebuilds the wrong way, because I think that sometimes people think that a rebuild has to take 3, 4, 5 years. Sometimes you make the right moves, it can be a pretty quick rebuild, but you can't put yourself in a place that you continue to stack on when you aren't there, and then you're in that place of mediocrity, and you do things that aren't going to position yourself to get out of that space. So I think that that's ultimately what they're faced with, big picture wise, with Jerry Jones. But maybe they've seen something in Jonathan Mingo that we aren't able to see exactly now, or they still believe in how they've evaluated previously. So I guess the jury will be out. Just don't really understand the move with some of the other issues that you have right now as a team.
Yeah, well spoken, my brother. And I think any Dallas Cowboys fans that's listening to you is holding on to that last sentence. Maybe they know something that we don't. But it doesn't look good. But we'll transition out. Another big move, if you would say, to some is Darius Smith traded to the Detroit Lions from the Cleveland Browns for some picks. Uh, this was a move that I felt like the Lions had to make because of the injury to um
Aiden
Aiden
Hutchinson.
Aiden Hutchinson. But I think that it's a good move. I think that it says a lot about what his franchise is trying to go, and they're going for it all, which they look darn good. I mean, they have at this point they have more touchdown passes than incompletions. So it's really just crazy out there in Detroit. I would love to get my hands on Ben Johnson down in New Orleans, but that's not the point here. What are your thoughts on this trade, and what do you think it does for the Lions?
Sounds like it is the point, since you had to slide it in. Just to,
you gotta
another
you gotta
point.
you gotta speak these things into existence, right?
Right. Right. But no, I think that, as you already mentioned, this was something that needed to be done. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson going down, that leaves a big hole, and you're not gonna necessarily like fill that void completely. But going out and getting a guy in Zadarius Smith, I think that it was a smart move. Obviously, as you mentioned, the details of the move is Zadarius Smith and the 2026 seventh round pick. for a 2025 fifth round pick. And so when you are a team that's in that place and space of contention, um, I would venture to say Detroit might be the best team in the league right now. That's including potentially the
The
Kansas
Ravens
City
might
Chiefs.
have the Ravens might have something to say about
Yeah,
that though.
yeah. I think you got probably a good probably big three or four around there
Oh
when you
yeah,
talk
I
about
agree.
the
Oh, I
Chiefs,
agree. Yeah.
the Ravens as you mentioned, and also the Lions. I think that they have probably separated themselves from everybody else in the league right now a little bit.
Mhm.
But when you're in that place and space, you got to go all in. And the thing about it is, it just fits the culture of. It's crazy to even talk like this because of everything that we've witnessed in our lifetime for the Detroit Lions, but it fits the culture of the organization at this point. You got a head coach that is always all in, and it came to bite
Mhm.
him in the playoffs last year
Yeah.
of being all
Yeah.
in with some of the
Yeah.
decisions that he made. But now you see, as an organization, they've decided, you know what? We're in the midst of this. We can contend. We got to go for it. So I think that it makes total sense for them.
Yeah, 100%, man. Well said. Well, if you don't have anything else on trades, I'm eager to get to this next segment. I know you are too. Well, one of our favorite times of the year, Bama week. As fellow LSU graduates, it's the time that we look forward to in the football season. Ramon, take it away, man. What you think?
Yeah. It's
Did I
one of
set the
those.
stage good enough for this? Right?
Hey,
You set the stage for us, man.
yeah.
Set the stage.
All
Let
right.
let the listeners know what this means.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, you never can kind of escape the magnitude of this game year in and year out. This game has been a big game for both teams since 2007. And we know what the thing was that made it a big game. It was obviously Nick Saban winded up in Tuscaloosa after what he had already done in Baton Rouge and winning the national championship. And of course, putting our football program back on the map. Since then, you've had so many matchups where the SEC West and really the SEC as a whole have been determined through that matchup. Countless NFL players have come through it. Some of the biggest matchups you could ever think of, 2011 wise, 2019 wise, things of that sort. But now you find yourself in kind of a different version of it. Nick Saban no longer around, so you don't have that piece or that fixture that's there. But you still look at two programs that this is essentially a playoff game for these two programs. Both teams come in with two losses, obviously coming into this. Both teams come in as flawed programs and flawed teams that still have good aspects to them as well too. And so I think that you're looking for and looking into a matchup that is going to be kind of maybe fit along the lines of the classics. Maybe it's not as the perennial powers that you're used to, and the true like national championship contenders. But you're looking at two teams that have everything on the line coming into this matchup. Two teams that are coming off a bye week. Two teams that I mentioned have some strengths and also have some very apparent weaknesses. And we know what that environment is like typically in Death Valley when Alabama comes rolling in. So I know it's going to be an electric atmosphere. College game day is there. And you look at, man, it's going to be a clash of the Titans once again.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And we're looking at it now. LSU sitting at 13th ranked, and Alabama's 11th ranked. These are two lost teams, like you mentioned. So this is an elimination game. One of these teams are not going to the playoffs, and it's all settled on Saturday. We know how Saturday night, which LSU is a different ball club, as they've proven already with that huge win against Ole Miss. We're different in Death Valley. But yeah, to get into some analytics of it, what do you think LSU has to do to win this game? I'll give you my thoughts, but you take it away.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that LSU is going to have to do, I'll give you one on each side of the ball, and both of these are very apparent and very obvious things. One, LSU is going to have to be able to run the ball. They're not going to be in a situation where it's going to be a thing that's going to be beneficial for us to throw 50, 55 times. You have to be able to run the ball. You can't abandon the run. That was part of what got them in trouble with Texas A&M. They ran the ball decently well early in the game, and then they just completely abandoned it and completely got away from it. And it became the Nussmeier show, and we know kind of how that ended. So that's one that's very simple, on the offensive side of the ball. And then defensive side of the ball, it's going to be really how they contain Jalen Milroe. And I say it from this regard. They have to make Milroe a passer. You have to make him beat you with his arms. He cannot be in a situation where he has the opportunity to beat you with his legs. We can't have a situation that looks A&M-esque again, where you have a dual threat quarterback that is just able to run all over you. And so at the end of the day, they're gonna have to make sure that they contain properly, and keep Milrow in the pocket. If Milrow slices and dices you from the pocket, it's just gonna be a long day. But ultimately, you have to make sure he's beating you with his arm and not with his legs.
Man, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, I think that that was what happened last year with Jalen Milrow, and he had over what 150 rushing yards on us.
And like
So
3 or 4 touchdowns maybe on the
yeah,
ground. Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah. So I mean, one of those things is we know that LSU's defense, we realize that it has improved from last year to this year, and a lot of the credit goes to Coach Baker for making us look like something. But we all can agree that the defense still has a lot to be desired. And we do believe that this recruiting class next year, starting with DJ Pickett, who I'm excited about coming on it. I know he's a corner, but I'm still excited. He's the best corner in the country. But it's things like that that you have to contain, like you said. And I think, for me, I think what's going to be huge in this moment is that Nuss has to play within himself. I think he has to take less chances, and he can't think that he's just gonna just rifle everything in and make these throws. He's capable of doing it, but we found that even last week, our last game in A&M, a lot of the problem was that he was trying to force things that weren't there and making throws that were, that he didn't have to make and making bad decisions. And that's how we gave a game away to A&M. And we can't afford to do that to a Bama team who is always historically well coached. I realize Saban's not there anymore, but as you can see, Bama is still Bama, and they still have the talent there. So we can't afford to come in there like that. And then the last thing I would say is CJ Daniels and his health. I think that if he is able to have a week off like he has and is able to work his way back in, that's another underneath threat. He's not a burner, but he's a great route runner and is another weapon that we could utilize on the offensive end. I think if we're able to do those things, I think that we will be okay. Honestly, I fully expect LSU to win this game, and I think we will be celebrating on to this one, and we'll be moving on. But that's just me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think of course too. I may be wearing my purple and gold glasses on this, but I do favor LSU in this one. I do think that it's gonna be a tough one. These are always tough ones, and I think that one more thing that I do feel is gonna be very important and what it'll come down to. I think that Nussmeier is gonna have to keep the defense honest with his legs. He's gonna have to keep the defense honest with his legs. The zone reads, the RPOs, all of that. If you're just handing it off every single time, handing it off and not making them respect your legs whatsoever, it does you no good. So he's going to have to get to that point where he is able to pull one of those, make the defense respect it. We don't expect him to take off for 30, 40 yards, but if I can get you 5 to 7 yards and you have to respect that time and time again, then that can be the game changer. But ultimately, it comes down to that atmosphere in Death Valley. To me, this is when I look at these two teams, if you place the game in either stadium, that's the team that I'm favoring. And so I'm favoring LSU and that atmosphere and that crowd being what pulls them over the top to get this win against Alabama.
Yeah, and we know that they're fully capable. I think this team has really kind of exceeded my expectation of what they could have done this year. I think we left a lot to be desired in some games, in USC mainly and A&M. I think that those are the two losses that we have, but we can't lose this game. We got to play with desperation. We know that three lost teams is not making the playoffs. I think that the guys will be fired up, so I'm excited for the game tonight. I mean, this weekend. Any
Yeah,
special
fast forward it
plans?
right quick.
Right. Any special plans for it? Or
I'm actually
how
gonna
you, how
keep it.
you?
I'm actually gonna keep it relatively low key. It's probably just gonna be at the house. Maybe just handful of people, 2 to 3 people over, and probably just get some food, maybe some wings, something like that. But probably relatively low key this time around. How about yourself?
Yeah, yeah, same here, man. Big games like this magnitude, I like to watch that in my crib. I like to hear the
Mm.
commentators. I'm locked in, so I rarely go out for games like this. But it should be exciting. It should be a good game. Again, LSU versus Alabama. You can find it on ESPN, 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time kickoff. So it should be fun. It's man, like I love the college playoffs, man. Because think about it, this game always would have some it always was a big game, but like to know that like one of these teams is not going to the playoff, that's just exciting. I think that's the best thing that college football could ever done because you can go across the board. They're like elimination games like across the board, and it
Yeah.
started like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and the thing about it is it gives you additional time as well too. If you'd have looked at this matchup and it had been last year, you would have felt that okay, both teams are out of it. You know, we just playing for the heck of it at this point of what still stands for the rivalry. But like you said, that expansion now gives these two teams something to truly play for. And I think that that's a big part too of why you even see College Game Day coming down to Baton Rouge because people know that everything is on the line with this matchup.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So we can jump into it. We'll wrap up with some fantasy football talk. I think with the waiver wire dried up at this point, I would think I'm really not interested in getting into waiver wire pickups. But I do think that it would be cool if we could give some advice for our fellow fantasy players and where they are. I know a lot of teams are 5-4. We got some 7-2 teams in week 9 at this point. I think that at this point of the season, it's either you're locked in or you're not, because obviously you might be out of contention of the playoffs. But is there any advice that you have for fantasy players at this point that you like to use at this point in the season?
I think that it's tough. It's one of those things that is very league dependent, very kind of position dependent. You know, obviously we typically are in a very competitive league that a lot of teams or several teams are still very much in it at this point. Especially we had a league one year where literally the top team from the bottom there was only a 2 game separation. You were first place at 8-6, and you were last place at 6-8. Like we literally had a
Yeah.
league that's that competitive. But I think the thing about it is ultimately, you just have to look at your team right now and see this is the trade deadline stretch. And so you got to see if there's a move out there that's going to get you over the hump. Especially if you're in a redraft league that is not a keeper league. I mean, you can kind of go all in at this point. I think keeper leagues kind of change your thought process and your mentality and philosophy a little bit because not everything is just hinging on this one year. Even though a lot is hinging on it, you still want to make sure that you keep some, things kind of stacked to the side just for the next season. But I would say ultimately, uh, what I would say is if you are sitting kind of towards the top of your league and you got a team that's a little bit kind of on that fringe and that's operating from desperation, this may be the opportunity to capitalize on that and get maybe a deal that isn't potentially in, I hate to say it, in their best interest, but one of those things that they're operating off pure desperation. You might be able to get something that can completely cement yourself as the top contender in your league. Um, I think it's one of those, like you said, the only real movement that you're gonna make at this point is really trade wise. You're not gonna find really at this point a big time waiver wire pickup that's just gonna change the course of the season. The only way that you can find that is if like an injury, really a major injury pops up at this point and it just makes a guy on the depth chart, shoot up to the top. But at this point, the only way you're gonna really shift things is to get active in the trade market this week.
Yep. And then you saw Christian McCaffrey is getting ramped up and his practice window has opened. So if you are a Christian McCaffrey owner like myself who waited it out and stood the storm, we are here. So all is not lost. I was able to, tread the storm, and in that particular league, I am 5-4. So I am in sixth place. So I am in the playoffs. So I've been able to kind of steer the ship there. But my advice to anybody that is a Christian McCaffrey owner, like I said, if he is able to, if you're able to, if you're on the other side of this and you don't have him, and depending on what your record is, it may be worth the risk to try to see what an owner will be willing to give up for Christian McCaffrey now that he knows that he's healthy. We all know I'm excited about him coming back, but we all know that he's going to have a ramp up period in games. Like, how long is it going to take him to be into form, and how long is it going to take Coach Shanahan to trust that he's healthy enough to withstand the volume that he was getting when he was healthy. So maybe you can trade for him, but like Ramon said, if you are, at this point, you got to go for broke. There's no game changers unless there's injury on the waiver wires at this point if you're in a competitive league. So maybe see what you can get for Christian McCaffrey. So that's my spiel. That's my advice.
Yep. Another quick one, and obviously he should be coming back very soon. But if you have a frustrated Nico Collins owner out there, target Nico in the trade, especially if you have a little wiggle room and you aren't, towards the bottom of your league, go and try to get Nico while you can. But, if somebody that's really savvy will understand that, hey, he's coming back soon, and they'll probably just wait on that piece. But if you have somebody that's been a little bit antsy and they're antsy Nico Collins owner, definitely try to capitalize on that.
And you got some owners that can afford to make a deal. So, maybe you could take advantage of that. If you have a stacked wide receiver core, you can maybe afford to let Nico go and get value back. But, like you said, I mean, who knows when he's going to come back? These soft tissue injuries, they're week to week and it changes. So I think that's good advice. But Ramon, I think we did it again, man. As we wrapping up, man, we appreciate anybody that has hung out for this long. We appreciate all of the first time listeners. We appreciate the return listeners and the day one listeners. As I like to say, this podcast can be found wherever you like to listen to your podcast at. So just make sure that you are subscribed and check us out on YouTube. Hit the button, hit the bell, hit the like button on the video. Make sure that you are subscribed to this great YouTube channel. That's where you can continue to get our content. Until next time, we out of here.
Later.